Hi guys, welcome back. This YouTuber here is Ebony, and the name of her story is My Health and Weight Loss Journey. Guys, I listened to this video earlier, and for some reason it just really touched me. So if you're the type that really loves touching stories, I think you'll like this video. Here we go.
Hey everyone, my name is Ebony. I want to share with you all about what I believe contributed to my weight gain and what made me who I am today. Let's start off real quick. Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I was raised by my mother, who was turning 40 the same year I was born. She was just like the best mother ever, despite her problems and the things that we went through. So she fed me what she thought was the best thing for me and her. We ate pretty much the same things. Some vegetables here or there. We ate a lot of processed foods. There were things that she didn't deny me, and she didn't want to say no, because it would also mean saying no to herself. So I ate a lot of chips. I drank a lot of, the juice drinks, candy. I mean, lots of trips to the corner store for snacks. Of course, she made cakes that were really good, and she cooked a lot of home cooked food, so it wasn't like I was just eating fast food all the time. Like, we ate fast food, but I remember a lot more of her cooking. And I guess that didn't really worry her about me because I was an active kid. Even though I was chubby and, maybe above average in weight, I still rode the bikes, I skated, ran and played hide and seek, and I played with whoever was willing to play with me. But that didn't really last long. I think it was around puberty. My activity level started to drop and decrease, and I remember staying in the house a lot to avoid being bullied and teased, more so the teasing and name calling about how big I was or how, fat I was and how dark I was. I was made fun of for being dark. And at the time, actually, I think I was darker than what I am now, because I played in the sun a lot. It was hot, sun is out, you're going to get darker. But nonetheless, I was still darker when I was younger. And I didn't really care at the time until I started becoming aware of my body, aware of my hips, my breasts, like my thighs touching and everything. Like, I noticed that I was gaining weight, and I was noticing things that people were pointing out negatively, even though they were positive then. There was nothing wrong with me then. I don't know, like, I was just embarrassed all the time about myself and my life. I had a friend, we walked to school together, we can go back home together, and she had moved and went to a new school. I was alone, and that's when the bullying started. Physical, verbal bullying. I went through sexual harassment from a student. Around the time, my mother was also going through something that at the time I didn't know what it was. It was weird. It was strange. She would act strange when she would be home, and times that she wasn't, she would be at work. She worked a lot, and she would work late, either second or third shift. And I would be home alone. Sometimes I'd go over a cousin's house, but I would be home a lot to eat. No one could tell me what not to eat.
When I was growing up, a lot of us were latchkey kids where we would literally have a little shoestring around our neck with our keys. We would let ourselves into our home after school, and a lot of times our babysitter would be Scooby Doo, right? Or maybe the Brady Bunch. If the Brady Bunch and Scooby Doo were your babysitters too when you were younger, please let me know down in the comments. We live in a different world now. A lot of kids don't walk, they're not as active. But one of the things that hasn't changed through the years is there's always some kids out there that are really dealing with some tough things. A lot of times you don't realize that that kid that's eating by themselves or that kid that's alone and doesn't seem to have friends, God, their life might just be horrible. So I just thought that you guys would really enjoy this video from the standpoint of if you had a similar childhood, once again, you're not alone.
I I don't know. I went through so much, and I internalized every bit of it. And I would come home and I would cry. I felt powerless and I felt alone. And I rarely talked about my feelings with my mother. Like, I would bring it up, and sometimes it would be dismissed, or sometimes she genuinely just didn't know what to do. And then after that, like I said, the bullying in 12th grade, and I didn't seek any help about that until I was 16, but I was out of that school. To tell the truth, though, I did rely too heavily on my feelings, and I believed the things that people said about me as if they were true because apparently I deserved it. I was big. I was, or I am dark skinned. Things like that, that whatever they found to pick on me, I thought maybe they're right because so many people are saying it and I'm such a lame and I'm so weird and all this other stuff, which I'm not lame, but I am a little eccentric. No, I'm not a little eccentric. I am eccentric, and I've learned to appreciate that about myself now.
I'm glad she appreciates that about herself now, because I was going to tell her, the nerds and the goofballs, they end up ruling the world, right? I hate that she had these feelings about herself because I look at her and I think, God, here she's an adult, but even here she looks like a teenager. She looks so youthful and young. And it's just tough when you look at people, sometimes you see such a positive nature that just emanates from them. And to know that they're hurting on the inside, it hurts my heart. And I'm one of these guys, by the way, that I'm usually like, hey, F your feelings, right? We live in a world where everybody's constantly talking about feelings, but this video is like 8 years old. This was before the world where we're in now, right? Where it's always lovey-dovey, filly-willy, right? This is something that's really, really genuine. And I don't know. It just really touched me.
Throughout my teen years, I gained so much weight so fast that I believe that I skipped sizes. And during those years, I really don't recall being under 200 pounds. I remember, um, I think writing in my diary at 14 that I was 224 pounds. And I don't think I was as tall as I am now. So it showed. The weight gain didn't stop till my early 20s. About a week before graduating college, I happened to weigh myself after doing cap and gown fittings. And I realized that the 1X size 1820 cap and gown was too tight. I couldn't button it. I can snap it or Velcro, whatever we had. I can't remember. And anyway, got on the scale, went to the gym, got on the scale, and the scale said I weighed 275 pounds. That was my highest weight. And to gain another 25 pounds wouldn't have been nothing because I was already gaining weight. I could gain weight like I could breathe. It was just, and I was another 25 pounds or 15 or whatever, and I wore stretchy clothes back then. So it was kind of hard to notice like some things were getting tighter. Or sometimes I just didn't care. I got used to it because I was so used to being big. I would just buy another size up. Because of the way I ate, what I ate, my lack of activity, my lack of knowledge of nutrition, it was too easy to gain weight. Hi, my name is Ebony, and this is part 2 of my weight loss journey. I want to pick up where I left off, and I think I remember the last thing I was telling you guys was about how much I weighed right before graduating college. And at that time, I mentioned to you that I weighed 275 pounds. Yeah, that's how much I weighed. And after I graduated college, I lost weight slowly, but I did. And I believe it was because of the fact that I was no longer surviving off college food and fast food. After college, I was still babysitting, but also got back into retail full time. Having those types of jobs where you're physically active, the weight began to slowly fall off. Around the same time, I had began a medication for a pre-existing liver condition.
Hey, before she gets into the liver condition, give me a thumbs up for showing you guys part 2. I wanted to see how this story finished off. But check this out. A lot of us had first jobs like that where we were active, where it was retail, or in my case, I worked at a movie theater. Absolutely loved that job. Got to see free movies, by the way. Anyway, when you have these jobs where you're active, you just tend to lose weight, just like she said. When we were kids and we played sports, we just tended to be smaller and thinner because we were more active. So, what does that tell you? It tells you that what you need to start doing is walking. Think about walking with me.
that medicine had a side effect of loss of appetite, among many other side effects. In between May of 2009 and February or March of 2010, I lost 45 pounds. I actually lost 45 pounds over the course of 9 months. I saw a little bit of the connection of reducing highly processed, sugary foods that I had in college. They tasted good and they kept me happy, but they kept me fat and ignorant in a sense. Some of those foods cause brain fog, and I didn't know then like I know now, but they do. So I went from 275 pounds to 230 pounds. I started dating my husband, and then we got married, and then about 3 months after we got married, I found out I was pregnant. But I think I was pregnant like at least maybe 3 weeks before I realized that I was pregnant. So I got married, got pregnant. During my pregnancy, I was eating terribly and I gained about 35 pounds. And I lost 17 pounds after my pregnancy, and then the remaining 18 just held on, or I held on to it. But either way, it was on there and it stayed for a while up until I started seeing a nutritionist in 2012. I was afraid I was going to end up like my mother, who didn't really take care of herself. And it was in my preteens that I really started noticing things that weren't good, whether it be from her eating habits or just odd behaviors that just contributed to the downfall of her health. I was 10 years old when she was diagnosed with diabetes. When I was 17, she had heart failure. And around this time, she was trying to get sober from abusing narcotics and alcohol, and they contributed to just a whole lot of problems. And I saw her deal with all of that. I saw her deal with all the problems that came with it, including detox and just the whole nastiness of it. And of course, I've never touched a drug like that in my life. I've seen my mother suffer from so much, especially obesity related and past drug use. And she had liver cirrhosis, she had heart failure and diabetes, hypertension, diabetic nerve pain, she had high water retention, to where she would gain about 50 to 60 pounds in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks. I've seen her in and out of nursing facilities for rehab to get all of that water weight off of her body. It was a lot to see, and I dealt with the most of it during college and in the middle of finals week and getting calls about my mother being in the hospital again. And it got worse and worse after college, and I had a newborn, and then I was still looking after her, and we were going through a hard time too then, so we were living with her. It was a lot. The burden of constant fear and worry and even some anger was always present. And it wasn't because I thought of her as an inconvenience. I was responsible for her, and I felt so helpless, and yet I was still under her authority because she was my mother. And even though I was an adult, I still had an authoritative respect for her. I looked up to her as my mother. It was always me and her for the longest. It wasn't until 4 days after her 66th birthday that her misery was over.
That one just really touched me because she obviously really loves her mom, and there are moments in your life when you're going through your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, where you need to be able to reach out to your mom and dad. And when they're no longer there, it's a real emptiness that's there. One thing she did say is that even though she was an adult, she had that authority respect for her mom, right? And one of the things we used to be told was to respect your elders. So now that I'm officially your elder, why don't you respect me when I tell you, go get your shoes? Let's go for a walk. Good morning, Venters. I hope you're having a nice Wednesday. Happy Hump Day! I have a little update on yesterday's story. Yesterday, I shared with you guys that 4 people were sent to their eternal resting places yesterday on a train outside of Chicago, Illinois. Good news is that the person that did this to these people was not an immigrant Venezuelan gangster. So that's good. The bad news is it's still yet another day in Chicago where people get sent to their graves a little bit earlier than they were supposed to be sent there naturally. What is it with Chicago? I think the city is cursed. I think the state is cursed. I understand that this happened 10 miles or so outside the city, but it's still the same story. Illinois, Chicago, that whole area, just nothing but bad news. If I lived there, I think I'd be making plans to just move and never go back. If you have any ties to Chicago or the outside areas of Chicago, let me know. Does this disappoint you? Just yet another story of senseless violence. I guess the good news is maybe the people never saw it coming. So, hopefully it was quick and swift for all of them. And rest their souls, whoever they are. I heard 2 stories today that just shocked me. And I figure even though they're a little gruesome, I might as well tell you guys. Former Minden, Louisiana Mayor and City Councilman Joe Cornelius and his daughter Keisha Miles were murdered. And they were murdered, believe it or not, by an 11-year-old family member who is being held on $500,000 bond. And that really, really shocked me. Because, apparently this kid must have gotten angry with his family members in some way, shape, or form. But could you imagine being the policeman first to the scene? That sounds like a really scary situation. I don't know what it is with the world that we live in today, but it just seems like there is a never-ending plethora of bad news. Total bad news. These are things that really sadden my heart. It would be really nice if we had a day where there was actually no bad news. I mean, I know it's impossible, but wouldn't that be something? If we could actually wake up and say, hey, yesterday something fantastic happened in America. There were no shootings, there were no deaths. I mean, obviously people die of natural reasons and natural causes every day. But I still think that would be a magical day, wouldn't it? And you know what's interesting? If that happened, because it's so impossible number-wise for that to ever happen, it would literally be a miracle. Wouldn't that be cool if we all, as a people, all around the world, could have a day where we all maybe prayed, and even if you weren't religious, maybe you could just have a day of peace. And the goal of that day is for us all to get together, every single one of us, and agree that, hey, on this day, every year, it's going to be a peaceful day of absolutely no war or no sadness. If we could some way, somehow do that. And you know what else would be great? I really wish I could talk without fear of YouTube, striking me down for a word that I use. So in case you guys are wondering, why doesn't he just say this word or that word? Who knows? God, it's just ridiculous. There's certain words that I want to use that, would easily go with my sentence. But apparently, every time I watch YouTube videos, I'm warned about how YouTube gets upset at creators that use certain words, and it just seems ridiculous. God, wouldn't it be nice if we actually lived in a society that was free like the one we grew up in? God, this is irritating. Good morning. Have a good walk.
Thanks, you too.
I noticed that you guys never mention the red venter LeBeau, but there is something really crazy about the idea of wearing a same color t-shirt every day, and I have a feeling it's the same exact shirt, which is just really, really interesting. I don't know if it's her lucky shirt or what, and it doesn't look dirty. It always looks clean and fresh every time I see it on her, but it's just one of those things where it's like, is that her favorite shirt or what? It must be. So anyway, back to what I was saying. Wouldn't it be cool if we could have a day of peace where nothing happened? It would be such a miracle, because somebody on the planet is always going to get wronged, and somebody on the planet is always going to lose their life to people that are doing bad. And that really saddens me. And this former mayor and city councilman, Joe Cornelius, he probably had certain people threaten his life throughout his career, right? He probably had some scary situations. But if you would have told him, hey, one of these days, an 11-year-old family member of yours is going to take out not only you, but your daughter, Keisha, I think he would have looked at you like you had 3 eyeballs and a horn growing out of your head, and he would have told you you're much mistaken. But the reality is, life is so short, you never know when your end is near, and it's just kind of sad that we have these types of situations. When is this madness going to end? Is it ever going to end? It looks like, mathematically speaking, it's not going to ever stop. And that's really, really disappointing. On another note, Kara Welsh was a 21-year-old gymnast for Wisconsin Whitewater, a school in Wisconsin. And her boyfriend, 23-year-old Chad Richards, was a wrestler there. And apparently over the weekend, her boyfriend went ahead and took her life. And her family is really, really sad. This guy was a wrestler at the school, and apparently some of his friends had said that in the weeks leading up to the demise of this of this gymnast, that apparently he had bragged about taking out some students in this way in the past. So one of those things where apparently now, because of that, they're looking at this as a premeditated murder type situation. You know what? I'm just going to talk. If we get any videos that are taken off, they get taken off. Let's just talk freely so I don't sound like I'm some goofball that can't speak. Basically, we have a murder problem in our country. We have a murder problem yesterday, we have a murder problem today, and we have a murder problem tomorrow. And every single time we have a murder, people want to take guns off the streets. But you want to know what the truth is? We need to start taking criminals off the streets, and we need to quit giving them a second chance. Because every single time things like this happen, we end up finding out that the guy that did it had a rap sheet a mile long. Now, the 2 cases that I've shared with you today, the 23-year-old wrestler that took out his girlfriend at Wisconsin Whitewater, and the 11-year-old that took out his family members in Minden, Louisiana, neither of these 2 had like a big rap sheet, obviously, because both of them are so young. But the gentleman that took out 4 people in the Chicago trains yesterday, from what I understand, he did have a rap sheet a mile and a half long. And at what point do you have to look at the judges or the people that let these heinous criminals out? At what point do you have to say, hey, this is on you? Again, I think they ought to take all judges, look at all the times that they let people out. And again, sometimes people's sentence runs out and they have to be let out. But a lot of times you find out that these people had 15, 20, 25-year sentences, and they got out after 4 or 5 years because of quote-unquote good behavior. I don't know about you, but I don't even know if we should count good behavior anymore in these prison systems. Is there really a good behavior that you can do to be forgiven for taking somebody's life? It's just ridiculous. So again, you've heard me now. I'm just going to start talking freely. I'm tired of tying one hand behind my back, afraid to say words. If a video gets taken down, you'll know it's because I said one of these words that apparently we're not allowed to speak anymore.
frankly, to be honest with you, I wanted to have a walk where you and I could talk, where we could walk, where we could vent, and we could strategize. And if every darn time I do a video, I'm afraid of saying a handful of words that apparently I'm going to want to say all the time because we live in a country full of bullshit, I'm just going to say it. So again, if you ever see a video pop up, watch it sooner rather than later, just in case the YouTube gods take it down. But you know what? I'm tired of going through life fearful of what stupid ass YouTube does with videos. If they want to strike down our comments because Mala says the word love or puts a rainbow on them, Mala, that's on YouTube. I don't know about you guys, I think it's ridiculous. And I'm starting to find out that it looks like our government has no trouble going to people like Facebook and Twitter and X and basically censoring stuff. You might think it's cool that things are censored when it helps your side of the aisle. But one of these days you're going to be censored and it ain't going to be cool anymore. And things have a way of flipping in this country, where one side is demonized one day and the other is demonized the next. And I'm telling you, this is one of those things where I hope one day we look back and we look at these companies that censor people and their words, and I hope they get punished. I'll say it like that. There's something that is so lame that I wish young people could understand. Our country was better 30 years ago when you could at least mention things and you could talk about things and you didn't have to worry about people throwing you towards the mob or censoring you and taking you off of your platform. You know what? My platform here has already gotten to the point where YouTube doesn't even like to share it. Why? Because apparently we're helping people lose weight without the need to take drugs and prescriptions. It probably doesn't work good for the algorithm, but you know what? Screw the damn algorithm. One of my gifts is the gifts of gab. One of the things that you can't do to people that have the gift of gab is you can't sit there and say, oh, don't use words A, B, C, and D, and then we're going to add to those words, and eventually you're going to find out that you used one, so we're going to strike your video down. Screw it. So again, from this point forward, we're just going to talk freely. There are a lot of murderers in this country. There are a lot of people that do bad, and there's a lot of reasons to be miserable. So how can we get those all out of our head and take advantage of a walk? I'll tell you how. Despite all these horrible things that happen on a national level, these things aren't really directly in your life. So what you have to do is you have to hear these stories and you have to say, that's a crying shame. And you have to put you and your family members in situations where that never happens to you. Case in point, this 11-year-old kid. How many of us right now have kids and grandkids that are around that age? That's where the parents need to be involved. Make sure if this kid is playing video games that he understands that what he's doing in the video game is something that is supposed to be kept at the video game level. Don't give this kid access to guns. If you have guns in your house, keep them locked up in a gun safe. You know what I mean? And here's the thing, I have to assume that former Mayor Minden probably got shot with his own gun. Okay, so if it's on anybody, it might be on the old mayor himself. Lock up your guns. You have an 11-year-old family member that has access to your guns. Lock them up. Now, I could be completely wrong and he could have gotten the gun from a friend, but you have to ask yourself, how the hell is this kid getting access to a gun at age 11? It's because some parents and some neighbors or whoever the heck he has access to don't have their gun in a proper gun safe. You know, these are things that usually gun owners are aware of, and usually they're smart enough for this stuff not to happen. And again, I don't know the whole situation, but we need to get to a point where it's like, golly, why don't we know this about this 11-year-old kid? And again, this could have happened out of the blue, right? But I hope you guys agree with me when I say it is a crying shame And it seems like some precautionary measures could have been taken to prevent this. Now, here's the scary thing that people don't always think about. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So if they don't keep this gun away from this 11-year-old, I think there's a very good chance that he would have probably done this in the future. So again, there might be a little tiny lining of silver in this dark cloud. And it's the idea that, hey, at least he did this to his family members and not to some other 10 and 11-year-old kids at a school. So I'm going to try to take the one little positive we can, but again, there's a chance that this video might get chopped down for saying words like murder and death, even though God knows in this country we live in, we seem to experience more murder and death than life and joy. God, that should be a saying, huh? In this country, for all the liberties and all the freedoms we get, things seem to be getting worse and worse and more miserable. God, that's why I think it's funny when you hear people say, why would we want to go back to the crooked back-ass country we used to be? Guys, whenever you hear people say that, ask them, what was so crooked and backwards about it? You know, I just don't understand. What was so crooked and backwards? And people have told me before, Jesse, I don't know if you know this or not, but in the 80s and 90s, the murder rates in places like Chicago and New York City were so much higher than they are nowadays. And it kind of makes sense. You know, back then, they didn't have cameras and closed circuit TV everywhere, right? Now that we have all these cameras and everything, you know, things are brought out to the light a little bit more often. What's a shame is when you have these cameras and then these judges know that these people are heinous, horrible people that don't deserve a second chance, and they put them right back on the streets with us, and guess what? They do it again. Isn't it irritating when you find out people have got like 17 or 18 things on their rap sheet that they've done? It's like, okay, at what point do you have to tell yourself, this person's a career criminal, there's very little, if any, good left in them. If anyone's going to forgive them at this point, it needs to be on Jesus, because we're not going to give this guy any more chances. It's ridiculous. You know, it's one thing to give a petty thief another chance. Okay, he likes to go in department stores and he likes to, you know, put clothing into his bag and walk off without paying it. Okay, that's a guy that's a ne'er-do-well, but he's not a horrible human being, right? He's just down on his luck. It's another thing when you take a guy that takes away the innocence of children and does horrible things to people, and then you put him back on the street. We as a people have to get to a point where we say, no more, you're not coming back on the street. I mean, at what point do you have to say enough is enough? And I wish the victims would all come together and say enough is enough, and I wish we would quit electing these weak-ass members of our political game that have no interest in doing the right thing by the people. If you're out there living your life the right way, it should irritate you that these judges and these court systems are so back-ass. You know what we need to quit doing? We need to quit offering one bad guy immunity for turning in another. How about, here's your immunity, you get life in prison instead of death. Now tell us who the heck is part of this ring of crime you're involved in. Every single one, and I mean every single one of these bad guys never learns their lesson. They don't get reformed in prison or jail. They stew. They stew over what they've done and who put them there. And they learn more stuff while they're there. And the things they learn are how to be even a worse criminal 101. And they learn how to perfect their evil. And then they come out on the world and they show us what they've learned. And it's sickening. It's to the point where I think the judges are more criminal than the criminals themselves. To think that there are judges every day that go to and from their house in the courtroom in their Mercedes, live in their gated communities, and never have to deal with shit. And then you want to know what's crazy? Every once in a while, one of these bad guys will actually find out where the judge lives, and they'll go and they'll take care of the judge. And then everybody says we need to make sure this never happens. We need the rule of law to be up here. Well, if the rule of law is going to be up here whenever famous people get taken out, then it's not really the rule of law. It's only the rule of law when it affects famous people. Take this football player in San Francisco, Ricky Pearsall. I think it would be a damn shame if San Francisco changes stuff now, because what you're telling people is that, hey, we're going to change when it affects the San Francisco 49ers and the city's chance to win a Super Bowl. But we're not going to change when it comes to the average person being thugged in real life. My goodness, this is ridiculous. We need to let I'm telling you, one of the things that would solve this is, instead of having these lifelong politicians and these lifelong judges, you give them a term. Here's your 4 years. At the end of the 4 years, we're going to look at your record as a judge. Who did you let out on the street? What was the recidivism rate? And if you're up there in the 90s, which most judges are because most criminals all repeat their crimes, we're going to take this ability away from you. And there are some people that when you look at the situation, it literally almost looks like the judge was paid off. Because there are some people where it's like this person had absolutely no reason to be put back out on the streets. Yet they are. Now, here's another thing that I never mentioned to you, but it's very true. One of the reasons that I don't like the idea of these hardcore criminals being put back on the streets is because I'm a walker. Every day that I walk and every day that you walk, we put ourselves out in public. And walkers usually aren't loaded to the gills with guns, right? We're not sitting there thinking, oh, how can we defend ourselves? And the whole idea that somebody could literally drive by and take your life, and then you find out that the person that did that had a rap sheet, that is horrible. Remember, we can't all just live inside of our house locked up in the basement all day. Number one, it's not healthy. Number two, it's not feasible. So when you have a situation where you have to get out and about, you'd like to think that your back is covered, by your police and by your mayor and by your governor. And it just doesn't always happen that way. I don't know if you guys can see that guy. I'm assuming you can. But he's got a prosthetic leg, which reminds me of something I forgot to tell you guys about. I've been watching the Paralympics the last couple of days, or at least I was. I was really amazed. I saw an American beat a Chinese archer with his feet. That was just the most amazing thing. He got a gold medal by getting closer to the bullseye in a shoot-off with a Chinese archer who was using his hands. I mean, this guy literally won with his feet. It was amazing. And a lot of the people I watched these sprints, my goodness, the Paralympic sprinters are really, really fast. Here's the crazy thing. I would have thought you would have seen a lot of people with, fake legs and stuff, but apparently the winner of the gold medal had cerebral palsy. But from outside appearances, he looked completely healthy and fine. But I guess internally, he was dealing with some neurological issues. Guys, I'm sorry when I get upset, but certain things irritate me, You want to be able to talk. And the real vent that I'm having is that as we get older, we're all on these social media platforms. And for people to say, you're allowed to say this, but you're not allowed to say this. And then a couple years later, you find out that it's flipped. But no matter what you do, you're always limited on what you can say. That is just getting old. I think we need to reject that. And then the story is, well, we have to limit what people can say because due to people lying and exaggerating, the wrong story is going to get out. Well, yeah, that's true. But when you're telling us one narrative, especially with what we dealt with over the last 4 years, you tell us one narrative and then you find out that narrative was a big lie. Well, quit censoring us. You censoring us made it where we just basically all had to parrot that lie over the last 4 years. And I'm sick of that crap. How about this? No matter what side of the aisle you're on, whether you're on the left or whether you're on the right or even somewhere in the middle, How about we agree we're going to let people speak? And whoever doesn't want to let people speak, how about we censor them? Wouldn't that be an idea? If everybody's okay with free speech except for this fringe group, how about we quit listening to what the fringe group says and we just go about with our lives? I don't know if you guys agree or not, but I feel like we as a whole really cater towards, these small groups that really are so small they shouldn't even really matter. The things that we've been fighting over in this country the last 4 or 5 years, I can't help but think it's over stuff that's just not even worth fighting over. Let people talk. If they say something that disgusts you, turn the channel. My goodness, you remember when we were little, you would have a friend and his family would not let him watch movies. We all had friends like this, right? He's spending the night at your house and you can't even watch The Goonies because The Goonies is PG-13 and his mom only lets him watch G-rated movies. We all had friends like this growing up. Those kids end up growing up and they end up lacking something in life. They end up lacking the idea that when you get out in the real world, people do use curse words. There are bad things. You can shelter your kid, but you can't shelter the world from words that you don't like. So let people hear what they're going to hear. Let people make their own choices. If you're an adult in this country especially, and you believe everything that you hear, well, then you're a fool. You should know that half the stuff you hear out there is not necessarily going to be true. But I mean, all of the people that died in our military through the years, do you remember when they used to have this mantra? I may not believe in the words that come out of your mouth, but I'll fight to the death so you have the right to say them. Well, that means all these veterans that lost their lives in the past, lost it so that we would eventually be censored? I don't think so. That's foul. That's wrong. And I wish that all the mentors would put down in the comments that when YouTube censors comments and they censor videos and they censor words, then YouTube is part of the problem. They're not part of the solution. Take this, for example. You see the thumbs up underneath this video and you see the thumbs down? Every time you or somebody hits a thumbs down, nobody gets to know about it. That's deception. Wouldn't it be great if every time you saw a BS video from some of the media outlets out there, wouldn't it be great if you could see how many thumbs downs they have? No, we live in a society, Jesse, where everything's positive, everything's great. When they tell you everything's positive and everything's great by avoiding the bad news and avoiding certain words, it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal. And people that are obese, it's no different. We're afraid of words like fat, and we have to use things like trigger warnings. Here's a trigger warning. Every time you do something poor when it comes to your diet or exercise routine, you're going to wish that you hadn't. How about that? How about we quit doing the wrong things in life, and how about we start doing the right things and making the right choices? And you know what? If we were all a little bit healthier, maybe words that people say wouldn't freak us out so much. It gets me so frustrated. Every one of these problems we deal with, it seems to me like there's a lot of easy, practical, real-world solutions, but because we are so polarized in this country and in this world, none of these problems ever get solved. But yet we up taxes every year so we can solve these problems that we don't want to solve. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you keep walking, because there is one problem we can solve. It's us.